This is Unit 210, Creating Digital Art. The aim of the unit is to develop your awareness of digital art and the tools and the processes involved in creating it, and where and how it's used across the digital media sector, and in our case, in particular, game design. The purpose of the unit is to provide a practical opportunity for the creation of a package of digital art for a defined digital media product. So you'll be tasked with creating some sprites, some 2D sprites, and also making some drawings inside Blender. So those are the learning outcomes. Digital art is artistic work that uses digital technology as part of the creative and presentation process. Art is incredibly important in game design in particular. Certainly when you're starting a game from scratch, you're going to need concept artists to come up with characters and environments in order for the 3D modelers to work from, or the pixel artists to create sprites and tile sets. Everything kind of begins with an artistic impression of the whole mood of the game, and it can dictate the art style of the entire game itself. A lot of you may find drawing quite daunting. Don't worry too much about that. There's plenty of other ways to make digital art. If you are good at drawing, then that's great, because there are a lot of roles out there for concept artists. So if drawing is your thing and art is your thing, then this is going to be the unit for you. If drawing isn't your thing, then this will be a good place to have a go at it. So there's lots of different techniques apart from drawing, as I just mentioned. Things like photogrammetry. This is a technique where you take a lot of photographs of a static object and you put that through a program, and it comes up with a 3D model which is photorealistic. Then you've got things like pixel art. These are all the 2D retro games and the Metroidvania style games that are about at the moment. And it's made using either Photoshop, or in our case we'll be using a website called Piskel App. Particle systems could be seen as art. You get those a lot inside Unity. They are things like smoke and explosions or gunfire. Character design. This is obviously where you get a bit more of the sort of drawing side of things. And the way to do the sort of drawing is to start off with a very, very simple kind of shapes, and then kind of build up from there and start filling things in. Projection mapping. It's quite an interesting technology. So you can project onto a building or a surface, and then you can make the building, you can manipulate what the building looks like, and some quite amazing results from that. Then you've got 2D sprite design animation. As mentioned, we'll be using Piskel App, and not only can you make static images or collectibles or tile sets, but you can also come with animations in the form of sprite sheets, which can be imported into Unity. Environmental design. This is used a lot in film and also game. So what you'll start off with, this is things like storyboarding, how the scenes are going to look, and how it's the general look and feel of the entire project. Virtual reality fairly recently has started to do a lot of very artistic endeavours. There's a few programs out there for creating 3D art inside a virtual reality environment. So the tools we'll be using will be Blender 2.8, which has got a feature inside it called Grease Pencil, and also Piskel App, as mentioned before, for your 2D sprites. They're both free to download, and so these are the ones that we're going to be using. Okay, let's take a short look at a film about the principles of design. There you go, the principles of design. There's messages and meaning in digital art, from things like Banksy's street art to the art style of things like Monument Valley. It gives you an aesthetic and it makes the gameplay a lot more enjoyable. Speaking of art style, let's take a look at some of the best art style games in 2017.
In this day and age, people are much too concerned with things like frame rates and resolutions. And there's no denying that those things are very important, but we also need to remember that there are other ways that a game can be just as visually impressive, if not more so. In 2017, we got a ton of games that made excellent use of art in order to make themselves stand out in an industry that all too often makes use of visual palettes that have, by this point, become rather generic. We're going to take a look at games released this year that we feel had the best art style, games that had the kind of look you cannot simply put out of your mind. So without further ado, here are Gaming Bolt's nominees for Best Art Style of a Game in 2017. The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. In Breath of the Wild, around every corner there is something marvelous to behold. The ruins of an old castle, the glistening form of a snaking river, a massive volcano towering over the landscape, a vast open field dotted with forests and lakes, and all the while, thanks to incredible draw distances, in the distance you can see looming figures begging you to move in their direction, from towers and mountain ranges to dragons floating across the sky. Breath of the Wild is a game that wants you to explore its world, and it does so by presenting you with striking imagery everywhere you go. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Hyrule has never been this beautiful. Cuphead. Cuphead is the kind of game that grabs your attention from the moment you lay eyes on it. That's a testament to just how unbelievably amazing it looks. But while it has to be commended for how incredibly faithful it is to its 1930s animation's influences, it deserves even more praise for how it puts its money where its mouth is. Cuphead pulls off its desired visual look with great aplomb, from the boss and enemy design to the animations, from the way the titular character snaps his fingers to the way barrels explode in clouds of white plume. The sense of personality that the visuals imbibe in every aspect of Cuphead is, without a doubt, one of the game's greatest strengths. Super Mario Odyssey. Throughout the course of Super Mario Odyssey, you visit all kinds of locations, from deserts and forests to frozen landscapes and ruins of destroyed kingdoms, and it's thanks to the game's excellent art style that all of these places are brought to life so convincingly. Every place you visit has its own distinct flavor and personality. Every enemy you see is designed excellently, and the sheer imaginativeness of everything you feast your eyes on is frankly astounding. Super Mario Odyssey represents the good that can come out of a Nintendo that is unconcerned with abiding to any sane structure, and its visual style is the perfect illustration of that. Horizon Zero Dawn. The idea of a post-apocalypse is one that sounds intriguing on paper, but it is Horizon's beautiful art that truly brings it to life. Everything from the overgrown forests to the snow-capped mountains, from the look of the machines that roam the land to the look of the cities and small settlements, it's all just so imaginative and so beautiful. And then there's the tiny little details, like the way the inhabitants of the world dress, to the way the remnants of the old world are just lying about. All of it sells the game's setting so well. You don't often find a game whose art style is as beautiful as it is technically impressive, but Horizon Zero Dawn definitely falls into that sparsely crowded category. Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle. How do you bring the worlds of Mario and the Rabbids together? How do you mesh them into a single cohesive whole? A vibrant and colorful visual palette, ingenious character design, and an incredible attention to detail. That's how. The idea of properly bringing the two worlds together may have seemed outlandish a few months ago, but Ubisoft's Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle handles that task expertly. It blends the two distinct worlds and their contrasting personalities so well that it's now become hard to imagine why people were even skeptical about it in the first place. Persona 5. Literally every nook and cranny of Persona 5 is jam-packed with visual flair. The bold art style of Persona 5 manifests itself in every pixel of the game, from its character design and dungeons to even things as simple as its menus, or hell, the fonts that it uses for its text. Even something as basic as the screen you see every time a battle ends is like nothing that we've ever seen in any RPG. This is a game that oozes funk and personality for the entirety of its 90-hour run, and it does so with supreme confidence. Nioh. Nioh is a game of contrasting tones. On the face of it, it's a decidedly grim and gritty experience in the vein of a typical Soulsborne game, but it's also a game that revels in refusing to take itself too seriously. That contrasting nature manifests itself in the game's art style as well. In Nioh, authenticity meets a fantasy-fueled take on feudal Japan. Nowhere is that more apparent than in the gloriously memorable and over-the-top interpretations of classical Japanese monsters and mythological creatures. It's a striking look, to say the least, and one that melds realism with imagination expertly. Xenoblade Chronicles 2. In true Monolith soft fashion, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 has the capacity to make you stare at your screen and the wonders being displayed on it for minutes on end. The world of Alrest is a breathtakingly beautiful one, and every location you visit stands out in memory long after you've moved on to the next. The game is full of beautiful, sweeping vistas and majestic structures looming in the distance, making you want to explore, even just for the sake of exploring. And a large part of that is thanks to its incredible art. Its semi-cel-shaded style does wonders too, because while it's clear that the game is lacking from a technical point of view, you just know that its visuals are still going to hold up well years from now. Pyre. By this point, you've come to expect a certain standard of visual quality from games by indie developer Supergiant, and fortunately enough, Pyre doesn't disappoint. In fact, it exceeds expectations. It's a game that's full of life and color, all of which is thanks to its sharp and vibrant visual style. Its hand-drawn assets are beautiful to look at, the character design is pleasantly unusual, while its more abstract style helps lend a certain distinct flavor to the game's environments. Pyre is a game that looks gorgeous and alien at the same time, in a manner that just sucks you right in from the moment it kicks off. Hollow Knight. There's something about Hollow Knight's clean, crisp visual style that immediately attracts the eye. It doesn't try to dazzle you with an explosion of color, nor does it present you with ambitious scenes of epic scope in an attempt to make you gasp. It's unconcerned with making any kind of an in-your-face visual statement, and that boldness and simplicity is exactly what elevates its art style to another level. The places you visit in the game are rendered with confidence, in a manner that's both subtle and effective at the same time. You don't often find games that go down that route, especially not ones that do it well, and we cherish Hollow Knight all the more for it. And the winner is Persona 5. This was a category that could have easily been won by any of our 10 nominees, but ultimately, we just had to pick Persona 5. This is a game that can best be described as an absolute treat for the eyes. A game with a sense of style like no other. It's like a masterfully illustrated comic book in motion, and perhaps the best use of an anime-like art style that we have ever seen in any video game. Atlus have clearly worked incredibly hard on making sure that every aspect of the game is bound together by a cohesive and memorable artistic flair, even in things that other games in the genre so often choose to ignore, and that's something that they deserve a lot of praise for. No matter what you're doing in Persona 5, whether it's dungeon crawling, or roaming about a city, or even looking at menus, you will be visually impressed. Persona 5 is a stylistic attack on the senses in the most amazing way possible.
Some great looking games in that. So sometimes technical limitations will dictate the art style. Certainly, for example, in many virtual reality games, they go for a lot of low poly style. So low poly means low polygons. The higher the poly count, the more memory you're going to be taking up. So low poly styles is very simple geometry with kind of quite boxy looking assets. And over the other end of the scale, you've got photorealism, which is used a lot in AAA games, especially nowadays. As the hardware has got a little bit better, it can process a lot more. And you'll see now there is a lot of very, very photorealistic games out there, like The Last of Us. So, 2D sprites and pixel art. Yep, you'll be using good old Piskel app in order to create some 2D sprites. You'll be tasked with copying some classic sprites from games such as Super Mario and Sonic. Here's a short demonstration on how to use Piskel app.
Hello Pixel people, and welcome to another PixelFlix tutorial. Today I'll be covering the basics of making pixel art and animations in the free web-based program Piskel. You can find it online at www.piscalapp.com, and I'll put a link in the description. Here's the homepage that gives you an overview of what it can do. So let's get started by clicking on Create a Sprite. A new screen will load where you can create your pixel art. It defaults to a black color under the palette window on the bottom right, and on the left are the basic tools like the pen for drawing and the eraser for erasing. On the top right is your preview window, and on the top left are the frame windows. Let's start by creating a new color by clicking on the plus sign under the palettes window to create a new palette. A window pops up with color sliders, so to make it blue, I'm going to click and drag the slider down to a blue hue and click in the color window to select a blue and adjust it until I get the blue I want in the preview boxes. After I have the color I want, I'm going to click Save and make sure to click on the new blue under the palettes window to make it my primary color that's previewed to the bottom right. To the right is a resize button for changing the pixel art size. It defaults to 32 by 32, and I'm going to change it to 16 by 16 and click Resize. Now that I have the color and size, I'm going to draw a simple Space Invader. After the first frame is done, I'm going to click on Add a New Frame to make a second frame for animation. The preview window is blinking because it is switching between frames. I'm going to click on the onion skin under the preview so I have a guide to work for my first frame. The animation defaults to 12 frames per second. I'm going to slide that back to 0 for now to stop the blinking and proceed to draw my second frame. The second frame is basically the same as the first, except I'm moving the arms up and the legs out. Click on the onion again to get rid of the preview, and I'm going to slide the frames per second bar until the animation speed looks good. 4 frames per second looks good for this simple 2-frame animation. Now that the animation is done, you have options to save or export to the right. You can download a PNG file into your downloads, or to the bottom are animated GIF options. You can resize it by selecting the resolution, and I'm going to size it up 10 times from 16 by 16 to 160 by 160, and click on Download GIF to save that to my downloads. And those are the basics for using Piscal to make pixel art and animation.
So as mentioned, your tasks will be things like recreating some sprites inside Piscal app, and also using Grease Pencil in Blender to copy some of these images. Also, if you'd want to make your own sprites or you want to make your own drawings, then by all means go ahead. If you want to push your art a little bit more, there are things called voxels, which are essentially 3D pixels. So every pixel is a cube. It's a bit like Minecraft. And you can download a program called Magica Voxel, which you'll find a link for in your unit materials sheet. And you can start playing around with that if you want to move on to some more complex art design. Finally, here's a small exercise that could be quite fun. Producing art to meet a brief. You know, this is optional, but it would be great if you could have a little crack at creating a new logo for Rockstar Games. And you'll want to download either GIMP or Krita, who are 2 free alternatives to Photoshop, and you can start playing around with that and kind of come up with 4 or 5 different alternatives, show them to your tutor and see which ones they like the best. As always, you'll find a lot of resources in your unit materials document in order to fill in all the questions and the tasks on the task sheet. So everything should be on there to help you get through this unit, and I really hope you enjoy it. So thank you for listening.